All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second technical assistance webinar introducing the recently released United States Department of Labor Employment and Training Administration Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities Funding Opportunity Announcement. As we deal with these unprecedented times, we wanted to let you know that DRA is here to support you and your workforce development efforts. Like most of the rest of America, DRA's employees have moved to home offices and are slowly starting to transition back, but we remain completely dedicated to assisting you. Because of the huge economic and workforce ramifications of COVID-19, we are putting our best efforts into creating content, trainings, and new ways to serve you as fast as we can. With that, I will turn it over to Chairman Chris Caldwell to provide some opening remarks. Chairman Caldwell.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I know that a lot of you are zoomed out or teamed out or whatever it is, and this has been a tired looking at screens. And I assure you that we wish that we were all there with you today. Ari and Alex and Susan, the DRA team, has worked tirelessly to try to obviously shift gears from what we were originally planning. And I think we've come up with a good product to help you to maximize this opportunity. This is the culmination of several years of hard working by the DRA staff, as well as Appalachian Regional Commission and Department of Labor, exhibiting federal cooperativism to try to tackle some serious issues that we remain laser focused on, as Ari said, despite the hardships and difficulties that the COVID-19 has brought to day-to-day business. I want to thank Josh and Sarah as well. GNO is a great organization, especially for a time like now. Their leader Michael and I have been speaking, and you guys have really done a great job keeping your membership involved at the tip of this spear. And aside from all the great things GNO does, I'm really excited to have them here today and for them to come and present to you guys. But I just would ask, I know it's easy to get distracted as you sit. This is like my fourth or fifth Zoom today, but just give us all your attention that you can, and I believe that the dividends that you receive from this will pay back in spades. So thank you all, and Ari, have it away.
Thank you, Chairman Caldwell. As he mentioned, my name is Ari Kanglis, and I'm a program manager with the Delta Regional Authority. I would like to introduce my colleague, Alex Holland, Senior Advisor here at DRA. We will be guiding you through today's webinar. I would also like to introduce and thank our good friends, Sarah Bradford and Josh Tatum, both with GNO Inc., for joining us today. You'll be hearing from them a little later about the great work that they're doing in the greater New Orleans region. And as always, I want to thank them for joining us and sharing their wisdom and insights with you today. As we move through today's webinar, if you have any questions, please submit those in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. Alex, Sarah, Josh, and I will address those in order at the conclusion of the webinar. Sorry, y'all, the technical difficulties that come with Zoom are always fun, and trying to do remote sharing and all that. So y'all hang with us for just a second. There we go. Okay, for the next 15 minutes, Alex and I will give a brief introduction to the 2020 WORC initiative, including award and eligibility information. Along the way, we will be providing some examples of how successful round one WORC applicants incorporated one or more of the eligible activities into their proposal. We'll then transition over to Sarah and Josh and hear more about GNO Inc. and how they structured their response to the 2019 WORC FOA. Next, Alex and I will take a deeper dive into the 2020 document, highlighting important sections, changes, and important scoring criteria. Before we close, we'll open the webinar for Q&A. And then finally, Alex and I will leave you with some additional resources and ways you can connect with us throughout the application cycle. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce you to a few acronyms that will be used throughout today's presentation. If any of the presenters use an acronym that is unfamiliar, please just drop that in the Q&A and we will be happy to clarify. Just for example, for the funding opportunity announcement, I might say FOA, I might say FOA. I don't know what'll come out at the time, but it'll be one of those two. And then not to be confusing, if I say WORC, I'm likely referring to the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities Grant Program.
Thanks, Ari. Hey everyone, this is Alex Holland, Senior Advisor for the Delta Regional Authority. Just want to be able to provide a little bit of context for the program that we are talking about today. This is the second round of funding for the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities program. This is a program of the Department of Labor in partnership with Delta Regional Authority, as well as our partners over at the Appalachian Regional Commission. That being said, first round, there was $30 million. That was last year where awards were made, and you'll be hearing from GNO Inc. a little bit more about how they coordinated those efforts in the greater New Orleans region. This year, again, another $30 million has been appropriated, and there will be a third round that we know for sure that will occur in 2021. This funding came out of Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri, his Labor HHS subcommittee in which he chairs. For the purposes of those who are listening in from the Delta region, as well as those who are listening in from the Appalachian region, this funding is broken down right down the middle. $14.6 million is available for those in the DRA region, and $14.6 million is available for those located in the ARC region as well. This opportunity, the grant range is $150,000 to $1.5 million. This is a change from last year. Last year, the grant ranged from $150,000 to $2.5 million, and we believe that to meet your needs, it'll be better to have smaller awards. We're hoping that more folks throughout the DRA and ARC regions will be able to take advantage of this program. Being partners with the Department of Labor, ARC and DRA are offering technical assistance, and we at DRA had already held 3 regional workshops that we had in Missouri, Illinois, and Kentucky in late February in anticipation of the funding opportunity announcement being released. And while we were attempting to visit all 8 states in the region, unfortunately, due to the current crisis, that could not happen. So we held 2 webinars. This is our second webinar. We will have a third should there be any need for that. But the other webinar that is coming up on May 29th from the Department of Labor will be their officials speaking about the program and to provide more insight and answer your technical questions about the funding opportunity. DRA will also be creating section by section videos to break down the funding opportunity announcement that we'll be going through today. As Ari mentioned, initially we'll give an overview of the program. We'll allow GNO Inc. to talk about how they approached the application last year and the project that they are doing that was successfully awarded. And then we're going to break down the funding opportunity on this webinar. But we want to be able to provide those bite-sized clips for you, and those will be available in the coming weeks. Additionally, if you are awarded through this program, DRA has committed to provide post-award technical assistance to all successful applicants. In fact, in January, we brought together the awardees from 2019, as well as those who received awards through the Delta Workforce Grant Program together in New Orleans, where we were able to host a peer exchange workshop. And even we conducted a site visit at Nunez Community College, which is a partner in GNO Inc.'s project that they helped coordinate down there to take a look at their Megatronics program, which is really interesting for our grantees. So we want to be able to build that community of practice, and we're here to support you with all of your needs. To begin, I do recommend that you have the funding opportunity announcement in front of you. If you do not, we will send that, that link in the chat. But to get started with this opportunity, please visit grants.gov. You'll be able to download all of the application materials from there. If you need assistance with that, please reach out to DRA. We'd be happy to help. But if you search WORC, you'll be able to find that opportunity, or you can spell out workforce opportunity for rural communities. We highly recommend you review the funding opportunity announcement in full, as well as the mandatory attachments, and we'll dive into those in just a bit. Also, if you are interested in being the lead applicant, please make sure that your sam.gov registration is active, as that is a requirement and prerequisite to apply for this program. Your application is due July 29th, no later than 3 p.m. Central Time. You will see in the funding opportunity that it will mention 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So just be sure that you are submitting this into grants.gov by that time. I would allow plenty of time for submission, at least 48 hours, because the last day that these are due, grants.gov ends up not being incredibly nice. So please get that in time. Also, I do want to mention this year that there is a new guideline that the Department of Labor will not accept hard copy submissions. Last year they did, so please be mindful of that.
Thanks, Alex. So just briefly to talk a little bit more about the program, the purpose of the program, specifically the goals and objectives. So the WORC initiative takes a long-term view toward assisting eligible communities in diversifying their economies by investing in local strategies developed by regional partners. As mentioned, the goal of this grant opportunity is to create economic prosperity and gainful employment opportunities for eligible residents in impacted ARC and DRA regions, enabling them to remain and thrive in these communities. Successful applicants under this initiative will address all of the following objectives in their proposed project. So first, implementing innovative, sustainable service delivery strategies, provide training, placement, and support activities to dislocated workers, new entrants to the workforce, incumbent workers, and those affected by substance use disorder, align and integrate workforce development initiatives with state, regional, or community economic development strategies, develop and expand industry partnerships, and provide or facilitate delivery of support services. And we'll talk a little bit about each of these in more detail here in just a moment. As Alex mentioned, this is a $29.2 million program with an award ceiling of $1.5 million and an award floor of $150,000. And the funding for this opportunity will be provided in the form of a grant. New to the program this year is that $5 million of the total program funding will support projects that address employment and training for eligible individuals affected by substance use disorder. The period of performance for these grants will be no more than 36 months from an anticipated start date of September 30th, 2020. This performance period includes all necessary implementation and startup activities, and that's very important when developing your project timeline. So know that on September 30th, your clock on your 36 months starts. So here's a slide that outlines just a few of the eligible applicants. This list is not exhaustive. A full list of eligible entities can be found on page 7 of the funding opportunity announcement. And if you have any questions about whether your organization is eligible, feel free to drop that in the Q&A feature and we will be happy to address that. So among eligible applicants listed on the previous slide, the applicant agency or organization must also demonstrate collaboration or engagement with at least 2 employer or industry partners and should partner with other organizations serving the economic, workforce development, and other needs of the community the application proposes to serve. Applicants are also required to demonstrate that they will serve eligible participants who live in the ARC and/or DRA regions. New to the 2020 WORC FOA, applicants may train eligible participants for jobs outside of either of the regions, so long as the applicant clearly demonstrates that employment in these occupations will not require participants to relocate outside of the region. Such jobs must clearly align with the overall intent of the grant application and the statement of need. So for cost sharing and leveraged resources, WORC does not require cost sharing or matching funds. Instead, the agency considers any resources contributed to the project beyond the funds provided by the agency as leveraged resources. It is strongly encouraged for projects to leverage resources with partners and other stakeholders. Only one application from each organization will be considered for funding. If multiple applications are received from the same organization, only the most recently received will be considered for funding. While only one application will be considered per organization, applicants can be included as a partner on another organization's application. As discussed previously, applicants must propose a project that serves workers in one or more of the following three targeted categories: new entrants to the workforce, dislocated workers, and/or incumbent workers. Within these categories, you may serve a wide range of individuals, such as high school or post-secondary students, individuals requiring adult basic and other education programs, individuals with disabilities, veterans, individuals with limited English proficiency, and individuals impacted by substance use disorder. So transitioning into allowable activities, allowable grant activities include training in work-based learning models, other employment-related activities, innovative service delivery strategies, participant support services, employer support services, or purchasing equipment and making renovations. We will give a brief overview of each, along with examples of how these activities were incorporated into a successful 2019 WORC application. But during this discussion, please keep in mind that successful 2019 applicants were often able to incorporate multiple activities into their project proposal. So first, we'll discuss training and work-based learning models. Some of the allowable training and learning approaches include, but are not limited to, traditional classroom training or work-based learning, such as apprenticeships, customized job training programs, incumbent worker training, OJT, internships, or other experiences. Two that first one I'll let Sarah and Josh talk about in a little more detail later. But the other one is Hines Community College with their MELTS program. They were able to partner with local and regional employers and industries to create and enhance a national model for manufacturing and logistics training, a national center for excellence into their curriculum at Hines. So other employment-related activities, these can be things such as employability training, punctuality, in-depth assessments and evaluation tools to identify barriers to employment, or career planning, job coaching, and job matching services. An example of a 2019 applicant that incorporated one or more of those eligible activities into their successful application was Arkansas Northeastern College and their AdWork program. A major component of their initiative was to provide peer coaching, counseling, mentoring, and case management to each participant through a 6-partner training consortium. Next, innovative service delivery strategies. These address economic and workforce-related impacts and aim to overcome existing challenges that might limit the ability of participants to be incorporated into training. These include new business models, new products, services, or technologies, such as expanding broadband access, mobile service units equipped with technology-enabled solutions, the development of training programs that support those impacted by substance use disorder, or developing new or enhancing existing partnership strategies for sustainable job growth. One particular 2019 applicant that I'd like to highlight was the University of West Alabama and their LINKS program. As a part of their proposal, they're developing a customized training program in advanced manufacturing and technologies, but putting that into a mobile training unit. And they're actually in the process of building that unit out right now and are going to be leveraging their network across their region to take the training to those most in need of upskilling and reskilling. Next, we'll discuss participant support services. Support services are necessary activities or resources that enable eligible individuals to participate in career and training services or to gain or retain employment. Applicants may propose to offer support services to participants directly or through partner organizations. These can include, but aren't limited to, transportation or child dependent care assistance, stipends, wages, or other incentives, equipment, including books, computers, and tablets, payment and fees for employment and training related applications, tests, and certifications. One thing to note is that applications proposing to include stipends or wages of any form exceeding 20% of the total grant award must receive prior approval. And one application, an applicant from last year that I'd like to highlight is Southeastern Louisiana University. Their RNCAP program is providing stipends for trainees. It's covering the cost of the training supplies as well as certification testing costs for participants that go through that expedited RN program. Next, we'll discuss employer support services. Applicants are encouraged to provide services to employers, particularly small and medium-sized employers. Efforts may focus on individual employers or have an industry-based approach for economic clusters or sectors, including but not limited to worksite peer coaching, counseling, and mentoring, creating, expanding, or enhancing apprenticeships, including the subsidies of apprentices and intern wages, customized training, and school-to-work type activities. In addition to meeting the workforce needs identified by these employers, applicants should also consider and incorporate, where feasible, other roles that employers may play in the overall grant activities. Once again, the GNO project is such a great project, and I'll let Sarah and Josh talk about that one. But another one I'd like to highlight is the Madisonville Community College project up in Kentucky. They were able to jointly create and deliver a 4-week commercial driver's license training course in conjunction with an expanded lineman training program. So that's a great example where they were able to meet a new need identified by local and regional employers in logistics training, but also an ongoing program, a lineman training program, and able to couple those and expedite some training. So this is the one that draws the most attention to this initiative, is purchasing equipment and making renovations. Capital expenditures such as these are allowable with prior approval from the grant officer, provided they address the employment and training needs of the community served by the proposed project. Possible allowable capital improvements include, but aren't limited to, improvements to buildings or equipment that would materially increase their value or useful life, including the cost to put the asset or improvement in place. Minor alterations, renovations, or rearrangements of buildings, facilities, or equipment are also allowable with prior approval from the grant officer. Allowable costs also include leasing space that is used for grant participant education, training, and related activities, as well as the altering or renovating of such facilities. Please note, award of this grant under this FOA does not constitute prior approval of equipment purchase or renovation mentioned in your initial scope of work or application. More information on eligible activities under this section can be found on page 12 and 13 of the FOA. And one thing to note, and we will come back to this a little bit later in the presentation, but one thing we like to highlight is that new construction is not an allowable activity under this initiative. So 2 projects from last year that I'd like to highlight is Base Camp Coding Academy down in Water Valley, Mississippi. Our good friend Kagan was on our Tuesday webinar and talked more about Everest and their partnership with Northwest Community College, but they actually took and renovated an abandoned garment factory and are going to incorporate new offerings from Northwest Community College, as well as expand Base Camp's existing coding model. And then also Panola County, the county's developing the concourse in partnership with Northwest Community College, where they're actually renovating an abandoned shopping center and making a satellite campus for Northwest Community College into this underutilized asset there in their community. So with that, you have a little bit of an introduction into the work initiative. Over to Sarah and Josh to hear more about their work with GNOU and then their partnership with their local and regional institutions of higher education and how they approached responding to the 2019 WORC FOA. Again, Sarah and Josh, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ari. We're honored to have the opportunity to share our grant with you and to continue to work with the DRA. And let's see, okay, I have control now to move forward. So as Ari mentioned, I'm Sarah Bradford. So I serve as the fundraiser and grant writer for Greater New Orleans, Inc., as well as our 501c3 affiliate organization, Greater New Orleans Development Foundation. And we refer to Greater New Orleans, Inc. as GNO Inc. I'm joined by my colleague, Josh Tatum, who's our program manager and runs a lot of our workforce programs, working with especially community colleges, in addition to other workforce partners. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about giving an introduction to, I'm making sure I can move. Oops. So I'll give an introduction to GNO Inc. And then Josh will talk about our mechatronics apprenticeship program and our application that we submitted to this WORC funding opportunity. And then I'll conclude by talking about our grant application itself and some lessons that we've learned. So GNO Inc. is the economic development organization serving the 10 parishes of Southeast Louisiana. So our region is basically the tip of the Louisiana boot. It's about 4,600 square miles. We have a population of about 1.4 million. And we have urban, suburban, and rural communities. And just about all of the region also falls within the DRA service territory. We have one parish that does not. And just in case you're not familiar, parishes is the term for counties in Louisiana. So we're surrounded by a lot of water right here at the bottom. We are similar to a traditional economic development organization in that about half of our staff works on attracting and retaining businesses. And then a little bit different than a traditional economic development organization, the other half of our staff works on quality of life, workforce, and business environment issues. And that is reflected in our mission statement, which is to create a Greater New Orleans with a thriving economy and an excellent quality of life for everyone. So those that term for everyone is the part that comes in and is really key for our workforce programs. Because to deliver an excellent quality of life for everyone with regards to workforce, it's important to not only bring the jobs to the region, but also to ensure that there are pathways for all of our residents in all different types of communities from all backgrounds to access the jobs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh to share about how our partnership in this grant application shaped up.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ari, for having us today, and thank you, DRA. We are very excited, thankful for the partnership with you all, and we look forward to continue to work with DRA. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm Josh Tatum, Program Manager at GNO Inc., really mainly focusing on workforce development programs that fall under what our program is called GNOU. And so what GNOU stands for is it's a demand-driven workforce development program, meaning it's industry-driven. We understand, have the industry at the table that really drives the conversations of training and what their needs are. And so we see it as a three-win approach. The companies are getting the workers they need, and then the schools are having curriculum that is relevant to the industry, and then the residents are better trained for high demand, high wage jobs. So we see it as a triple win for the region. And in our region, to give you a little bit of background, in the 10 parish region, there's 13 community colleges and 4-year institutions. So we have a large cluster of colleges and universities within our region that really are key to helping us pump out our workforce pipelines for our industry. And as you'll see through this presentation, the mechatronics, 3 of our community colleges came to the table to address this need. So give you an overview of the GNOU process. So this can be two ways. How we see GNOU is that an industry partner can come to us and say, hey, we have this need for X, Y, and Z training program. Is there a program in place? And we reach out to our partners at the local colleges in the region and say, hey, do y'all currently have this in place? And if they do, then we make those connections. And if they don't, that's when we really have that platform that'll allow the industry partners as well as the higher ed institutions to come together and have that place to discuss what curriculum will look like that'll be driven by the industry. Or it could be the vice versa. A university or college partner comes to us and says, hey, we want to create this program. Does it make sense? Does this make sense to the local job market? And then what we'll do is we'll look at data, we'll talk with the industry partners, go door to door, and really just make sure that that is a relevant curriculum that makes sense for the community college or university partners to create. And then we see that as a triple win again, because it's really just driven by industry. The universities see it as a huge win, and community colleges see it as a big win because it gets more people in seats that are relevant training for high wage, high demand jobs in our region. So a little background on the mechatronics program. About 2 years ago, there was Elmer's Chocolate, as you see on here, had 2 German expats that came over from Germany to help run the Elmer Chocolate factory on the North Shore. And that's up in Hammond in Tangipahoa Parish. And Elmer Chocolate reached out to GNOU Inc. and said, hey, we've got this really unique need that's called mechatronics. Well, when we heard that, we had no idea what mechatronics was. So we did the good old Google, typed it in and had to Google what mechatronics was, and came to find out that it's a really interesting blend. And I'll go into detail on the next slide of what mechatronics is, but it's a blend of mechanical, electrical, robotics style engineering that is kind of the 4.0 manufacturing that we're seeing as technology continues to develop. But Elmer Chocolate came up to us and said, hey, we've got this unique need that we want to get people trained to be able to work on our machines. And so we were like, great, let's look at what the community colleges or our university partners are offering and see what we can do. And they said, well, we only need 2 people. We only need to hire 2 people. And we said, well, we didn't know what that would be for the community colleges to want to develop that type of program only for 2 people. So we said, if you have the need here in the region, there's probably 2 or 3 other companies in the region that also have this need. So we reached out, and come to find out, Latrim, who has a presence on the North Shore as well as in Jefferson Parish, came to the table and said, yes, we have this need too and would love to be a part of it. And then as well as Zatarans and McCormick came to the table as well and said, we have this need and we would love to be a part of this partnership. So now that we had this economy of scale idea from the companies, we then had to find the training partners. And so we sent out an RFI to all the community colleges in the region and put together an RFI that we thought would be competitive, and turned out that all the 3 of the community colleges in the region wanted to work together on this. And so that's what you see here is the 3 community colleges: Delgado Community College in New Orleans, Nunez Community College that's located right beside us in St. Bernard Parish in Chalmette, and North Shore Technical Community College on the North Shore in Covington. So to give you a program overview, as I was saying, mechatronics is a blend of electrical systems, mechanical systems, computers that really help with the backside of the development of these robotics, and as well as the upkeep of these really expensive machines that the companies are investing in. And so as they continue to invest in these very expensive robotic machines, they also wanted to take this earn to learn model as a leading advanced manufacturer workforce approach of saying, if we're going to invest in our equipment, we also want to invest in people. And so it's a 2-year program that began in August of last year. And so that, as I said, the earn and learn model, while they are in school learning, they are also getting paid and have full benefits, and their wages are paid, as well as the tuition and fees are covered for the employer. All health benefits, everything that a full-time employee would receive at the job, they got those same benefits when they were in school and on the job. And also the biggest thing about the mechatronics is that it's stackable industry credentials that they're receiving through this. So they're not only receiving just the overall one credential, there's multiple industry-based credentials that they're receiving. That was really appealing to the employer partners. As mentioned, it's a 2-year commitment. So right now, the first cohort that started in August of 2019, they just finished up their first year. There was 9 apprentices, and during this 2-year commitment, they will go 8 weeks at the community college. So they started at North Shore Technical Community College. Then they went 8 weeks at their chosen employer partner. So the apprentices apply to each of the 3 companies like they would like a regular job. You apply, send in your application, and then the employer partners then review the applications, they do the screening, and then they are offered a position by one of the 3 or whoever the apprentices who they applied to. So then they go to the chosen employer and then back to the community college, and the next community college is Nunez, and then to the employer partner, and so forth. And they end their first year at Delgado, and then they go back to North Shore. So it's an 8-week on, 8-week off period. And to give you a picture of the landscape of the overall, where the community colleges are located, it really is a commitment that these students are making, because they're having to drive to their employer location, as well as the 3 different community colleges. And it's really nice to see the apprentices, they're coming together, they share rides and so forth to get around. So they all rotate at the 3 campuses around the region, as you see North Shore on the north side of the lake, and then the 2 Delgado and Nunez down at the bottom. So to give you a little timeline of launching the program and how this all came about, I gave a little bit, talked about Elmer as they came to Geno Inc. with the concept. That was in the 3rd quarter of 2017, and really we wanted to reach out to some more, go door to door as mentioned, and really didn't have the foundation of what it looked like to about 2018, 2nd quarter. And then that's when we started drafting the RFPs and for the training providers, came right after that. And then we started the collaboration process for the program development. And then we had an MOU, a signing ceremony that was very successful. All the community college came together, and we put on a great program for the apprentices during their signing time as well. And then as you see in the Q2 of 2019, the recruitment event started. And then in August of 2019, the program began. And this year we're having that same timeline as well. So we'll start at the second cohort come August of 2020. And with that, I'll hand that over back to Sarah to talk about funding.
Thanks, Josh. So where this grant comes in is that we had a lot of the tools and base in place for the program, and because the employers were stepping up to the plate and we had such a depth of equipment and instructor expertise between the 3 community colleges, we felt comfortable getting started, but we didn't have the full equipment and all the resources needed to see the project through the 2 years of the mechatronics program. So when we found this grant opportunity, it was just such an excellent opportunity to see this program through, to scale this mechatronics program, and then also to replicate our findings and best practices with this collaborative model for other work-based learning programs. So let's see. Okay, so I shared this just to, last year's grant opportunity was a much shorter timeline than this one. So this year, and especially if you're interested in getting started this early, you're in great shape. So the point of sharing this timeline is just to share that we had the baseline and the framework in place to be able to be responsive to this funding opportunity. So one of our big pieces of advice is just, sometimes we don't always know how things are going to work out, but having such great collaboration in place with our community colleges and employers allowed us to move really quickly and be responsive. So also thrown in this timeline, just a little fun twist for everyone who does grants. The Friday before this application was due, in South Louisiana, we had a tropical storm warning and offices were shut down. So we had a really fun mad dash to get the materials in and submitted. And as Alex mentioned, it's always good to leave a couple of days wiggle room to make sure everything is uploaded appropriately. So clearly it all worked out for us. But so my recommendations for getting started as a person who's primarily responsible for grants is to figure out, if you're working out with partners, who's going to be the lead applicant. So for us, even though Geno Inc. was the intermediary and sort of the collaborative entity, because there was a large number of equipment and we also have a mobile training unit, which was similar to one of the projects that Ari mentioned, we needed an entity that had proper procurement protocols. Geno Inc. being an economic development organization does not procure or store equipment and materials. So we decided to lead with North Shore Technical being the applicant. And the primary reason for that is that they are a state entity, so they had proper procurement protocols, they had access to state contract pricing, and a lot of other tools that made it an easier process should we be awarded. So it's super important to check and make sure the lead applicant has their grants.gov login, SAM registration, their DUNS number, etc. And I just say that because if they've had any staff changes or they can't find a password, sometimes recovering those things can take a long time, and you don't want to do the work and then run into a last minute issue. So then when you tackle, and Ari ran through a lot of the requirements in it, but I would just want to point out that this year the fillable template is just such a huge help. And general note is just always to make sure to follow the template and the word counts and everything to make sure you make it through to the review phase. And for us, it was really important to figure out how we were going to explain our program and our narrative in a way that was simple and organized, so that a person who hadn't been involved in this process for the last 2 years could come into it and really easily understand what we were trying to do. So we broke our entire narrative and timeline and our budget down into 3 different phases. So launching and seeing first cohort of the mechatronics apprenticeship program through, and then maintaining that and growing that mechatronics program while we launched an additional program. And then the third year, we would maintain and grow those first two programs and launch a second additional program. And my final recommendation, and everyone has their own way that, that works for them, I always think it's a better idea to write the summary or the abstract last. Well, I know that seems backwards and like you would want to write the shortest part first or the summary first. I always find that if you do that, you end up going back several times to edit and rewrite it. And so it's better to wait until the very end when you have a really clear picture of what you're going for and writing it in one fell swoop. So finally, and Josh and Josh, please feel free to add anything here on lessons learned. But this is a mix of program development recommendations as well as some recommendations specific to the grant. In general, we feel it's really important for employers to participate on their own volition. We don't want to convince them because it'll just really cause headaches and frustration and really might result in the program being unsuccessful in the end. We also feel that we were successful, as I mentioned, because we had the partnership and framework ready to go and in place, so we could be immediately responsive to the program. And then once the funds were awarded, we could immediately move to action. Because then, part of the goal is to get these funds utilized and going and get the programs delivered to individuals. And then if you have multiple partners, you really need one entity and point of contact that's coordinating. So even though North Shore Technical was the lead for our application, this was us. And we think it's okay, and I guess DRA would have to also give their input on this, but okay to start small, so to make sure that you can prove success. So for mechatronics, we committed to 9 apprentices a year off the bat. So the goal is, of course, that we grow and scale and increase both for mechatronics and for the replication programs that we'll deliver, but starting small and making sure that you can deliver quality and your participants can graduate and get the certifications and certificates and secure jobs, we feel is really important.
And I would also add as well in there is a lesson learned, or really just a good point, that when we were in the very beginning process of starting the program, we actually went over to Hines Community College, a group of us, to talk with them, learn their best practices that they implemented with their mechatronics program, and really learned so much from them. So I would highly recommend, if you're trying to develop a program, do some research, see what's already out there. There might be another organization or peer group that has maybe something that they're working on, and you could really collaborate. And Hines Community College really helped us to look at what we needed from an equipment standpoint, overall structuring of the program, and the community college partners really enjoyed that collaboration of heading over to Mississippi to speak with them. So I would recommend reaching out to other partner peers to collaborate as well on your certain program. And with that, I believe that's all we have for today. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Josh, Sarah, thank you both for joining today and for, like I said, sharing your wisdom and insights to the FOA. I think Alex mentioned a little earlier in the presentation that we were able to take a cohort of successful work applicants from last year, as well as DRA's workforce program, and take them all over to Nunez and show them some of the great work that's happening specifically with that program. And kudos to both of you and all the great work that y'all are doing in the greater New Orleans region. So now that you have an introduction to the FOA and have heard about a successful 2019 application, we're going to transition into a section by section discussion of the FOA and review the requirements and contents of a competitive proposal. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, please, some of you have already taken advantage of it already, please submit those in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There we go. Okay, it may jump again here in just a second, but we're on the right slide for now. So here, I'm going to say this with a disclaimer. Alex will talk briefly, and Sarah mentioned it just a little bit in her presentation about an optional format for responding to this FOA for the 2020 cycle, but I'm going to go through a detailed structure of the way it's broken down in the FOA. So the Employment and Training Administration has instituted a technical review process that reviews applications on the merit of the proposed project scope and objectives. It is important that you understand the standards and requirements your applications will be judged. And assuming you take the 10-page full narrative format, this is everything. So the list here on this slide is everything you will need to submit in order to submit a complete application. And with that said, as you develop your application, as Sarah mentioned, we strongly encourage you all to utilize the checklist that's included in the FOA on page 8. It'll be extremely helpful for you as you go through and making sure that you identify each one of these criteria as you're developing that application. So again, I won't go through each one of these in detail. Just as a reminder, applicants must serve workers in one of the following 3 categories: new entrants, dislocated workers, or incumbent workers. And second, just a reminder of what the eligible grant activities are. Again, if you have any questions about whether your project or your proposal, whether it might be eligible, please feel free to submit that question in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be happy to address that at the end of the webinar. All right, so jumping in, so the project narrative here, you'll see is comprised of 5 sections, totaling 100 possible points. The project narrative, it must demonstrate the applicant's capability to implement the grant project in accordance with the provisions of the FOA. It must provide a comprehensive framework and description of all aspects of the proposed project. It must be succinct, self-explanatory, and well organized so that reviewers can understand the proposed project. It's limited to 10 double-spaced, single-sided, 8.5 by 11-inch pages with Times New Roman 12-point font and 1-inch margins. I know some of you are probably smiling. That's actually specified in the FOA, and they do check to make sure that the proposal meets those formatting criteria. You must number the project narrative beginning with page 1, and materials beyond the specified page limit will not be read or considered. And then now I'm going to jump into each of the subcomponents of these 5 in order. So first, the statement of need and strategic alignment, it has 5 individual pieces with the points listed for each out beside them. So first, the statement of need and strategic alignment of the application must clearly explain the reason for the proposed project. It must also support the grant initiative's goal of creating economic prosperity and gainful employment opportunities for eligible residents in impacted DRA or ARC regions so that they may remain and thrive in these communities. The statement of need must describe the need for assistance, the nature and scope of challenges to overcome, and the consequences of not addressing that need. The needs described must align with the targeted population served. Major emphasis will be placed on the following 5 criteria listed here. And then first, the description of community or communities and needs. You must identify the region the project's serving, including the required supporting documentation used to identify the region. You must also discuss the region's economic and workforce challenges, the consequences of not addressing those challenges, and include the required documentation identifying the named challenges. This could include things like the region's unemployment rate or poverty rate. Second, the demonstration of inclusion of an opportunity zone. You should demonstrate that at least 1 census tract in the service area that your project is covering is classified as an opportunity zone. I will note that this is not a requirement of this FOA, but demonstration that one of the areas that you're serving in your project is classified as an opportunity zone will award you those 2 points. Next, the description of workforce needs. It covers the extent to which the application describes the workforce needs of at least 2 identified employers and the specific gap to be addressed by the proposed project. As part of this, both of those employers is required, and it must describe the specific skills training needed for anticipated or future job placement at those employers' companies. Fourth, the target population. You must identify the population you intend to serve through the grant, including any supporting information on why this population was selected. And then you must also discuss how the target population meets the eligibility requirements as specified in the FOA. Once again, that's getting back to whether you're serving new entrants, dislocated workers, incumbent workers, or individuals affected by substance use disorder, and then why you chose that population as your target. And then also you must discuss how you plan to recruit this population into your proposed training activities. And finally, alignment with strategic plans. I will turn it over to Alex and let her discuss in more detail.
Thanks, Ari. For those of you who applied or were interested in applying for this program last year, you'll remember that a key objective of the program was alignment with strategic plans. Last year, you only needed to align with 3 plans. This year, in the funding opportunity announcement, the Department of Labor added a 4th plan, which is the WIOA state plan from 2018 through 2020. So I'll address that one first. Your project activities should align with the strategic element section of the WIOA state plan from 2018 through 2020. So that will be in the lead applicant state. Your project should also align with the DRA federal plan, and that is the Regional Development Plan 3 that you see at the bottom of your screen. For the lead applicant state, you'll also need to align your project with the DRA state plan for your state. And lastly, you'll need to align your project with a local or regional plan. If you are concerned that your area does not have a local plan to align with, there are some exceptions where you can use, for example, a Chamber of Commerce's key objectives and strategic goals, if they have those drafted. But if you have a specific question about that, if that impacts you, please feel free to reach out to us. Because there are 4 plans that you need to align your project with, I would advise that your narrative doesn't focus too much on digging into the details of each plan. Make sure that you're able to concisely describe how the project activities touch each one of these plans or align with them, and to give out an easy way to do that. For example, with the DRA federal plan, one of the 3 goals is improved workforce competitiveness. And I imagine that all or most projects under this program would align with that goal pretty easily. So find a way to describe this in a way that is concise and clearly aligned with those plans. Next, we're going to jump into the arguably most important part of the narrative, and that is your project description. You'll notice that this portion of the application is 30 points. You'll also notice shortly thereafter that the outputs, outcomes, and sustainability section is also 30 points. But the project description is where you really start to get into the meat and potatoes of your project. And project design will be 20 points, project partners 10 points, and we will discuss those in more detail now. So your project design has a lot of information that is required. This is where you will discuss all of the project activities and how you will be implementing those. You need to connect these project activities to the needs and challenges that you demonstrate previously or earlier in your application. It's essential that these are connected. It is essential that it is also connected to the work initiative goal, which is gainful employment and increased economic prosperity for those residents of the DRA or ARC regions. That also allows these folks to stay in the regions, even if these jobs or the training takes place outside of the region, such as for those who are in the trucking industry. You need to make sure you address the skills gap for the region or the service area in your application. These must be aligned with employer needs, and at a minimum, you need to include 2 employers who are engaged on the project who can demonstrate the need for specific skill sets that align with the proposed project activities. Last year, it was just 1, so I just want to make note that this year it is at a minimum 2 employers in your region. There is no guarantee or requirement that these employers hire those who are trained through the program, but if you can show that the employers are engaged in a way that is meaningful and more impactful for the program, your application will appear more competitive. And keep in mind that the project activity should align with the project timeline. So don't try to squeeze everything possible in there. Make sure you're able to actually accomplish all of the activities that you can given the 3-year timeline. And also make sure your budget reflects the activities that you're proposing and vice versa. If you talk about it or discuss it in your project activities underneath this project design narrative, make sure that is reflected in the budget. Also, again, like I said, you don't want to include everything that cannot be accomplished within the period of performance. So make sure that what you are proposing is realistic and can be attained in a timely fashion with the desired outcomes and results. And next, project partners. This is also a very important part of the overall project description. Last year, I'll note that there were applications that mentioned a lot of partners. And while it looked good to have all of those folks engaged, it was not clear what the engagement was. So don't just put names in the application because you think it'll look good. Make sure that you are finding a way to take your most important, say 3 to 5, 3 to 6 partners who are going to be engaged on this project. Describe who they are, what type of partners they are, whether they be employers or training providers or wraparound services such as a nonprofit. And discuss the strength of your partnerships, how those have evolved, and also the shared resources and roles that these partners will be playing in the project. And that will also be provided in supporting documentation. So not only providing those letters of engagement from employers, but if you'd like to provide some letters from those who are also going to be engaged in the project and will be providing substantial time and resources to the effort, please include those letters. And again, as a reminder, at a minimum 2 letters from employers on this application.
Thanks, Alex. And so she briefly mentioned this, but we'll transition over to project results and sustainability. As you can see, this is 30 points and a significant part of the overall project narrative as far as scoring. Many of you might remember from last year, and Alex can correct me if I'm wrong, the total points awarded to this section were about half of what they are this year. So significant emphasis has been placed on results and sustainability, with the majority of that being directed towards short and medium term results or outcomes. So the applicant must clearly state expected project results that are specific, measurable, achievable, and reasonable according to the project design and timeline. Project results must include short and medium-term results that include outputs and outcomes achieved by the end of the grant period, and long-term benefits that include outcomes expected 5+ years at the end of the grant period to demonstrate sustainability. And like last year, outputs and outcomes achieved by the end of the grant period must, at a minimum, must include the number of participants obtaining new or improved employment opportunities. And we know, and we found out throughout going across the region, that there seems to be some confusion about what exactly outputs and outcomes are and differentiating between the two. So we'll discuss those in turn and give you some examples. So first, I'm just going to go across the top row to give you an example of a difference between a short and medium term output, and then transition into how you can make those outcomes. So following the first row, an activity, a short-term activity would be the development of one GED apprenticeship program. And then, so a medium-term output would be specifically participants served. So you have 100 GED workers, trainees that end up receiving some kind of assistance or are served through your program. So then stepping over to outcomes. So the short-term outcome would be 100 workers, trainees needing basic education, obtain a GED. And two things to note, these need to correspond with the identified output, which in this case is the development of this program. And then second, these are achieved during the grant life cycle. Then going over to medium-term results, once again, these correspond with the short-term results and are achieved by the end grant date. So that would be workers and trainees improve skills and basic education knowledge as a result of going through this program. And there are a few more examples here. And again, we'll put these slides up so you can go through each one of these in turn. They're also listed in the FOA. New to this year's program is a little bit more emphasis on long-term project benefits and how those are defined. Sustainability and long-term impact are very important to the work initiative this year. The applicant must clearly identify the anticipated long-term benefits for the participants, employers, and communities served by the grant, explaining how the activities and investments made under the grant continue to benefit the workforce and economy 5 years after the end of the project. The applicant must also explain the plan to sustain the work of the project after grant funding ends. Major emphasis will be placed on your description of a reasonable outlook for the project 5+ years beyond the period of performance, specifically a demonstration of project sustainability. And much like last year, and also worth noting again, is the anticipation of achieving or receiving additional grant funding alone does not suffice as project sustainability. And next is organizational, administrative, and physical capacity. This section is worth 10 points. It's comprised of 2 subsections. So financial and management documentation to demonstrate organizational and physical capacity. That is 5 points. And then the associated resumes or job descriptions if new positions are going to be hired to demonstrate administrative capacity, which is also 5 points. Major emphasis will be placed on the submission of staff resumes and again of those job descriptions. So staff resumes of anyone that's going to be involved in the management or the implementation of this project, as well as job descriptions for new positions that are going to need to be hired as a result of obtaining this grant. And then second, the completion or submission of one of the following, a financial system assessment form. This is actually located in the FOA on pages 42 through 44. You could also submit the applicant's most recent audited financial report or an IRS Form 990. And I believe this is the last piece before we transition over into a new opportunity with this initiative is the budget and budget narrative. So the applicant must demonstrate that the items included in the budget are consistent with the project narrative. The applicant must complete the SF-424A budget information form. The associated budget narrative must provide a description of the cost associated with each line item in the SF-424A. And all of those items in the 424A are what's listed there on the right underneath budget narrative. It must separate the primary cost components of each line item, which when added together provide the line item total. It must also provide the basis for the cost and the function or use of that particular item. Note that the 424 and the 424A and budget narrative must include the entire federal grant amount requested, not just for 1 year. Do not show any leveraged resources that you have on the 424 or 424A. You should describe those leveraged resources in the budget narrative. The budget narrative should also include a section describing, once again, those leveraged resources to support the grant. Those are all those resources that are both cash and in kind in excess of the award. And one thing again that I'll note, I mentioned earlier that construction is not allowed as in this program. And many of you are probably saying, well, on the 424A, construction is a line item. That's not a trick. It's just a standard form. Make sure that you leave the construction line on your 424A 0.
Thanks, Ari. So what Ari and I just described was everything that goes into the project narrative. And while the project narrative is limited to the restrictions that Ari had read out earlier with the 10-page limit, double space, 12-point font, the Department of Labor has also released an optional attachment A called the proposal summary, which is what can be used in lieu of your project narrative. And while this optional attachment A is not required and we cannot require it, I believe Ari and I both agree that we would highly recommend using the attachment A because it will help you gather your thoughts and to be able to address every component of the funding opportunity announcement, whereas with your own blank document, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to collect your thoughts, and the attachment A breaks down each section so that you're able to clearly and more concisely provide your narrative. I'll also mention that in reviewing the applications, as you can imagine, when reviewers are reviewing 15 to 20 applications like this, it can be a bit daunting and reviewers will get tired as they go through it. It's just a reality. This attachment A will make it a lot easier for reviewers to check off and make sure that you are hitting all of the criteria. And I believe that scores will improve as a result of that. So highly recommend it. The mandatory forms, regardless of if you submit the project narrative from a blank Word document or you submit the optional attachment A, you will need to provide the SF-424 application for federal assistance as well as the SF-424A under budget information. There's also requested attachments to the project narrative, and everything must be named a certain way. I would ask that you review page 28 to see what is required as far as naming each of these documents that are requested as attachments to the project narrative. The first is a designation of the ARC or DRA region. I imagine that some of you on the call might be located in both regions. You still must designate which region you are in, and I'll go over that on the next slide, what that will look like. You'll also need to submit an abstract. It's 2 pages long, and it tells you in the funding opportunity exactly what needs to be included in the abstract. While omitting the abstract will not impact the score, it is really helpful for grant officers as well as the reviewers to be able to see exactly what they'll find in the full proposal. You'll also need to attach your project timeline indicating from start to finish over that 36-month period of performance, the project activities and when they will be occurring. Evidence of required partnerships are first and foremost the 2 letters of engagement from employers as well as other important partnerships to your project. If you have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, you'll need to attach your agreement to the project narrative, as well as key staff resumes or job descriptions for the personnel who will be working on this project, as well as those you anticipate hiring should you be awarded the grant. All applicants will also need to submit financial system assessment information, and that is in the form of a financial system assessment form, an IRS 990, or your most recent audit, depending on the organization that you come from. As I mentioned previously, the designation of the DRA or ARC region will be a required document that you submit. It will look something like this, where you indicate where the proposed project will take place. Is it in the Delta, or Appalachian region. And also you'll need to show the service area of where your project will be taking place. And as you can see on the slide here, we are indicating that the project will be serving the city of Cape Girardeau in that county in the state of Missouri, and it points to it. For the abstract, like I said, it's a long list of everything that you'll need to include, but some of these, like the applicant name, your project title, and the description of area to be served, number of participants to be served, those can kind of be in a bulleted form, including your funding level that you're requesting. You will need to calculate the cost per participant. So based on the number of those participants you estimate to be served, divide what you are requesting as part of the project in order to calculate that number. You'll need to mention if any of the project activities will be occurring in an opportunity zone. While it's not required to take place in an opportunity zone, you do need to mention the census tracts if that is relevant to your project. You'll need to list the type of participants to be trained, and that is the dislocated workers, the incumbent workers, or those that are new entrants to the workforce, as well as the projected number of those participants that will obtain new or enhanced employment, and then your brief summary of what the project entails. This is probably the most important slide that you'll see, and we'll be providing a checklist on the website that you'll be able to find. But this is another pros versus cons of submitting your project narrative versus submitting the optional attachment A. The full list of bullet points here are all of the attachments that you must submit when completing your project narrative on a separate document. If you are to submit the optional attachment A, you will only need to submit those attachments with an asterisk next to it. So you'll see you'll need an SF424, an SF424A, your budget narrative, your applicant designation for which region you're located in, the letters of engagement from at least 2 employers, and if you have an indirect cost rate agreement, you'll need to submit that, as well as your financial system assessment form, your most recent audit, or the IRS Form 990. You will not need to submit the other bullet points listed here if you submit the optional attachment A, which is a huge lift off of applicants' shoulders, I would think. For the application review, make sure you look at the funding opportunity under the screening criteria. That's in section 3C1, and this is something that we'll also provide on the DRA website. That is on page 8 of the funding opportunity. You must include or have all of these components in order to make it through to the review process. So if your application does not include all of these pieces, it will not be reviewed. Also, the total number of grants awarded will depend upon the number of competitive applications that come in, as well as the amounts requested. There's no set number of grants that will be made. It will all depend on where these applications land as far as their scores, and you can also see the scoring criteria in full in the funding opportunity as well. We highly recommend you follow the scoring criteria as you're putting together your application, because this is a merit-based and competitive application process. And lastly, these are the agency contacts for the Department of Labor. Jennifer McHenry, the grants management specialist, will be able to answer technical questions about the funding opportunity announcement, while DRA can answer several questions related to this. If there's something very specific that you don't understand and it's more technical in nature, please reach out to Jennifer. She led the review panels last year and is incredibly knowledgeable about the funding opportunity, and she helped drafted it. So please reach out to her. Also, reach out to workforce@dra.gov. There's also a form on the DRA website if you go to dra.gov/workforce that you can fill out and schedule some time to talk to Ari about your specific project. we'll make sure we answer your questions and lead you in a direction so that you are most competitive in this competition. Thanks, Ari, for sending that form out in the chat. But now we want to shift over. We know some of you have already submitted questions. We've been able to answer some that were a little bit more specific, but we're going to jump in. I also invite you, if you have any questions of GNO Inc., please feel free to ask those questions too. But we'll start with the questions for DRA. The first question is, where can we find award information from previous awards? So this information is available on the Department of Labor website as well as DRA's webpage. So I invite you to visit dra.gov/workforce. If you go under the 2020 resources tab, you will see the 2019 awardees. There's a press release and there's also descriptions that the Department of Labor did. There are 2 links on the DRA website, and I believe RH has just shared out that link. There are a lot of resources on there, so please use them. Will this PowerPoint be shared with participants? Yes. Again, the PowerPoint will be provided to all participants on the webinar, and it'll also be located on the website. This webinar is also being recorded, and so that video clip will be on YouTube and will also be shared on the 2020 resources page for you to review again. Are tuitions or scholarships eligible? So under participant support services on page 11 of the funding opportunity announcement, it allows for the provision of stipends, wages, or other incentives to ensure participants are able to participate in the program and or obtain or retain employment. So yes, tuition, as well as other incentives for participants to participate in the training is allowable. I will note that if stipends or wages of any kind are used or applied for, that it cannot exceed more than 20% without prior approval from a federal grant officer at the Department of Labor. What is an opportunity zone and where do you find information about opportunity zones? So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the opportunity zone incentive was developed under the Tax Cuts Act, I believe of 2017. You will find a link on the 2020 resources page on the DRA website. With that information, it'll provide you with every single census tract that the Department of Treasury has identified. These were submitted by your governors of each state to the Department of Treasury to then name opportunity zones. There's everyone asked the question if you can become an opportunity zone, but at this time there are no additional opportunity zones that will be created. So please check that link on the dra.gov/workforce page. Does the project have to have employers located in rural areas or target employees from rural areas? Great question. No, while it's a little misleading that the program is called Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities, these projects can occur in urban and rural communities. There's no population limitation. Of course, in the demonstration of need or statement of need under this funding opportunity announcement, you will need to show that this funding is needed in order to serve those residents who might be underserved by other training programs and why yours might be unique. But this does not have to serve only those in rural areas. All right, can grant funds be subcontracted to another entity if needed? Yes, and the funding opportunity does break down the difference between contractors, subawards, and there's one other there that I'm forgetting. But yes, they can. These can flow through a pass-through entity if needed. I'll wait another couple of minutes in case there are other questions, but for now, that's all that's been submitted. Cece, we will get to you separately about the GIS mapping? Any other questions about the program? Okay, well, like I said, we invite you to visit dra.gov/workforce, where you'll find all of the resources and information that we discussed today. Additionally, we will be sending a follow-up email to all of you who are on the webinar today, as well as those who are on the webinar on Tuesday. You'll receive the presentation. You'll also receive the funding opportunity announcement in a PDF form, as well as the grants.gov link. We will provide you with the federal grant officer's contact information, Jennifer, that we shared today, as well as sam.gov registration information. We will also provide you with that checklist. We're creating a checklist for the screening criteria, as well as checklist for the difference between submitting your project narrative versus the attachment A. You'll find the links to DRA's RDP3, as well as the state plans that you can reference, the application package materials, and a link to DRA's resource page. I've got a few more questions I'll answer. And Heather, thanks for providing that map. And do you have to align with the ARC strategic plan? No, if you are applying for the Delta region, you only need to align with the DRA federal plan and the DRA state plan. It just depends on the region that you're applying for. So no, you'll not need to align with the ARC strategic plan. All right, folks. Well, let us know if you have any questions. Like we said, you can reach out to us at any time. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We hope we've found it helpful in creating a competitive proposal for the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities grant program. Thank you and have a great week.